Hence, such subjects as history, geography, languages, fine arts, morality, ethics, religions, sciences, mathematics, and others should be included in the curriculum. The idealistic scheme of curriculum may be represented with the means of the following. Education, I have two types of activities: physical activities and spiritual activities. Physical activities involves care of body skills, whereas spiritual activities add like intellectual, moral, aesthetic, and religious. Sir Peridan recommends that the school should make a provision for these activities that are of greatest and most permanent significance in the wider world and are the grandest expression of the human spirit, those that are essential for maintaining the standards of individual and social life, and those are that represent the lofty of civilization. Idealism and methods of teaching. Idealism has exercised more influence on the aims and objectives of education rather than on methods of teaching. It speaks of general nature of teaching methods. It does not specify any method to be adopted. The Greek idealist Plato, however, advocated the Socratic method, dialectics. Many educational philosophers advocated many other methods, the didactic method, the inductive method, the analytic method, and so on. Idealism is not much concerned with the choice of methods so long its essential objective is fulfilled, which is the enrichment of personality of the pupil and to educate a child as to lead him to discover and develop what is within him rather than that which is beyond him is the real goal of education. And with a good teacher any other method can work well to realize the objective. Idealism lays stress on instruction, activity, and experience. The word instruction has been used in the wider sense, meaning educative instruction, not order or uh, repression. It implies sympathetic guidance by the teacher, emphasizing the need of such instruction. Harvard says, I have no conception of education without instruction and do not acknowledge any instruction which does not educate. Instruction does not let the mind become a storehouse of vague and undesirable ideas. It chisels and chastens them. Another factor which realism emphasizes in the method of teaching is activity or learning by doing. The normal child should learn through activity. Idealism does not decree questioning, discussion, and lecture methods of teaching, but it extols the method of creative and spontaneous mental activity. It does so because creative activity leads to self expression and realization of the highest potentialities of the child. Mental activity leads the child to learn with pleasure and love, and this love exalts his personality and introduces him systematically and deliberately into a wholly new order of things. Experience as a significant place in the idealistic method of teaching. The truly educative acts are those which go on within the private experiences of the learner and the comprised of the student's own self activity, never of the artifice of the clever teacher. The duty of the teacher is to develop in him an insight into deeper experiences than he already possesses. In addition to it, the teacher should endeavor to unfold his potentialities by providing him stimulating experiences. In short, the essence of idealistic method of teaching is activity and freedom, freedom which is regulated and guided. Idealism and teacher. The naturalist would do without the teacher at times. He positively represents his interference in the development of the child and would like this development to be unchecked, unrestricted, and unmodified by any sort of suggestions, guidance, or direction. According to him, there is no place. Hi, Asad. Okay. According to him, there is no place for the teacher in his natural and autonomous process of development towards perfection and rationality. This idealist does not less the importance of the teacher in the idealistic system of education. The teacher is indispensable. Okay. I'll repeat this last one because it's very important. In the idealistic system of education, the teacher is indispensable. The teacher is indispensable. The immature pupil cannot be expected to be able to understand by his own intelligence the real nature of the eternal values he has to realize in his life. That it is only under the enlightened advice and able guidance of some individual of mature understanding and seasoned experience that the child can have such a knowledge. Thus, according to idealism, there can be no teaching without a teacher. There can be no teaching without a teacher. Hey, Umar Mughal. Alhamdulillah, I'm fine. Are you fine? Okay. Mm, where was I? Okay, it is only under the enlightened advice and able guidance of some individual of mature understanding and seasoned experience that the child can have such a knowledge. Thus, according to idealism, there can be no teaching without a teacher. There can be no teaching without a teacher. The immature learner can never be able to perfect his personality. The immature learner can never be able to perfect his personality unless there is someone to teach him the methods of becoming perfect. Okay? The immature learner can never be able to perfect his personality unless there is someone to teach him the methods of becoming perfect. The universe is a rational system of which the teacher forms one part and the pupil another. Okay. The universe is a rational system of which the teacher forms one part and the pupil another. Universe is a rational system. Teacher forms one part and the pupil another. The two are related to each other by the bond of a common purpose. The teacher the purpose of perfecting the personality of the child, this purpose is known clearly to the teacher but only vaguely to the people. The teacher has to. It's bro. Uh, this one. It's for B.Ed, which is compulsory to be a teacher in Pakistan, and it's written by Dr. Muhammad Sadiq, and it includes six subjects: the philosophy of education, human development and learning, general methods of teaching, critical thinking and reflective practices, environmental education, computer applications. This purpose is known clearly to the teacher but only vaguely to the pupil. The teacher has to make this purpose clear to the immature pupil. He has to explain it and also devise some methods of enabling him to realize this purpose. The teacher is thus necessary for advising. The teacher is thus necessary for advising, directing, and even controlling the conduct of the pupil in order that he may be able to ensure the perfection of his responsibility, or the perfection of his personality. The idealist teacher can guide and help his pupil in three ways. Firstly, this is very important. Firstly, he can influence them by his personality by associating with them personally. Secondly, he can suggest questions and problems to them and encourage them to think for and encourage themselves to think for themselves. Thirdly, he can enable them to understand the problem by following the scientific methods of analysis and synthesis. According to Ross, in the idealistic scheme of studies, the teacher is needed to assist the educand who is developing according to the laws of nature to attain levels that would otherwise be denied him. The law of nature to attain levels that would otherwise be denied him. The teacher is needed to draw the attention of the pupil to the formative side of his education as much as a garden requires a gardener to tend the tiny and young. According to idealism, education is a process in which the educator as well as the educand is working out his salvation, and both are achieving self-realization by interaction with one another. The pupil is as much a necessity for the teacher as the teacher for the pupil. The teacher needs the pupil for his own spiritual growth and salvation. Idealism and discipline. Freedom is the cry of naturalists, while discipline is that of the idealists. The latter believe that the child cannot attain his complete development unless he submits himself to a process of discipline. A child cannot attain his complete development unless he submits himself for a process of discipline. It is only through this process that self realization and spiritual attainment can be made possible. The idealists, however, do not favor rigid discipline. In fact, their theory of discipline is based on their concept of freedom. In fact, their theory of discipline is based on their concept of freedom. Their chief concern is to harmonize freedom with subjection to authority and discipline. No unite submission to the necessary restraint with the children's capability of exercising his free will. It is this process of discipline that will enable the educand to understand the great values of life. It is the process of discipline that will enable the educand to understand the great values of life, the inherent spiritual values as such the teacher's guidance is necessary. He will present ideals of conduct for the educand to follow and will see that his environment is conducive to the realization of his spiritual potentialities. The idealists look askance at the free discipline. Okay, sorry for the interruption. Let's continue. Self realization recognizes the importance of teachers' guidance. Probable, however, resented the imposition of the arbitrary will of the teacher. Control over the children was to be exercised through a knowledge of his interest and by expression of love and sympathy. Some idealists go to the extent of recommending direct moral instruction as an agent of maintaining discipline. Discipline, according to them, implies cultivation of moral virtues such as humility and obedience to the elder. Criticism of idealism. It's very important topic. Okay, criticism. when we deny things, when we give evidence against idealism. Okay. Some thinkers have criticized idealism in education as though idealism is very eloquent about the aims and ideals of education. So it says very little about the methods of teaching. That's why we criticize it. Okay. Idealism advocates a rigorous discipline which is altogether out of the tune with the modern conception of education. The educationist of today believes in applying little or no authority at all. He wants to reduce the imposition of rules of work and conduct on the pupil of the minimum. He wants the entire activity and process of education to be purely spontaneous effort on the part of the pupil. Idealism allows assigns an exaggerated role exaggerated role to the teacher when it makes him an indispensable instructor and disciplinarian. This conception of an educator seems to be too primitive. In the modern times, such a teacher would be simply a bad number. It is extremely doubtful if such a teacher can ever reach the confidence of his pupils and inspires them to learn. The modern teacher does not aim at teaching the pupil but at teaching the pupil how to teach himself. So, we criticize idealism in education. The ideal of education, the attainment of the ultimate and absolute values, is too abstract to be grasped and appreciated by the immature pupil. The aim of the child's education may thus be clearly known to the educator, but it cannot be understood by the young people. How can there be a thorough cooperation between the teacher and the pupil in this circumstances is a matter of extreme mystery. It's a matter of extreme mystery. Contribution of idealism. Contribution of idealism has exercised a great influence on education and has largely inspired educational thought in respect of the ultimate goals of education. Let us see. So far as aims of education are concerned, no other thought can stand with the light of idealism. It is a unique contribution of idealism in its having given a clear definition of the goals and aims of education and having drawn a point attention to the cultural and spiritual sides of man's life and education. Idealism has laid an invaluable emphasis on the dignity of the individual and on the personality of the child. It has rightly stressed the importance of aiming at the training and the perfection of the educand's personality. Character building is the most laudable among the aims of education. Idealism has rightly stressed the need or and importance of discipline in education. The immature pupil can not be expected to be able to discriminate between good and evil, so there can be a danger of his committing blunders which may quite often involve a great risk for him. Idealism has rightly stressed the need and importance of discipline in education. This immature pupil can not be expected to be able to discriminate between good and evil, so there can be a danger of his committing blunders which may quite often involve in great risk for him. Thus, some set rules of conduct imposed by the experience personality of the teacher are a necessity, at least in the initial stages of the pupil's life and education. Realism. Aquinas, Aristotle, Bacon, and Locke. Realism is not a philosophy of life like idealism or naturalism. Realism is not a philosophy of life like idealism and naturalism, but like pragmatism. Pragmatism, it is an attitude of mind, a mode of thinking, and an attempt of to explain the nature of things. It is a doctrine that the objects of our senses exist independently of their being known or perceived by mind. Realism. Basic principles of realism. Realism is an epistemological school. The basic principle of realism is the principle of independence. If we put a question like, can a thing exist without being humanly known, or can a thing exist independent of our knowledge? The realist would say yes, whereas the answer of epistemological idealism will be in the negative. Now, one who holds that an object known is independent of the knowing mind may still hold that independent object is spiritual in nature. Hence, he would be epistemologically a realist but metaphysically an idealist. Plato was metaphysically and idealist, but epistemologically a realist. Most of the modern realists are either materialists or dualists or neutralists. The realism admits of various types and degrees because the object may be held to be either wholly independent of or distinct from the mind, or to be partly so, and that to different extents. Therefore, the maximum of realism is to presupposition that there is such a thing as knowledge. In other words, the perception and thought refer to some object, not the mere experience of perceiving and thinking. The maximum of idealism, on the other side, would be the assurance that everything ever perceived or thought of existed apart from appearation and exactly in the form in which it is believed to exist. In other words, there is no such thing as error. Whereas realism in education, now, realism in education, coming into the field of education, realism has acquired different meanings and even contradictory ones at different periods of history. Today, realism is a reaction against the book centered academic, intellectual, liberal, literary, and humanistic education. It favors child centered, practical, specific, scientific, and psychological education. Applied to education, realism manifested itself in three different forms, namely humanistic realism, social realism, and sense realism. Basic principles of realism in education. Before this realism topic, we discussed the basic principles of idealism in education, and now we are on topic of basic principles of realism in education. Like idealism and naturalism, realism also manifested in different forms in the field of education. But like idealism and naturalism, it today has a broad meaning, and it has also exercised a potent influence on education by emphasizing the following basic principles. Since we live in a world which is rapidly changing, it is necessary that we remain prepared to adjust ourselves to any psychological, intellectual, and social change that occur at any time. A philosophy of education should be based on the realities of life, and it can prove its worth by being practical. No ism can solve problems of education. No ism can solve problems of education. To be useful, education must organize by harmonizing values, parts, past and present. To be useful, education must be organized by harmonizing values, past and present. Things and objects exist independently. Human experiences, limited truth, truths of science are more reliable. The surest way of acquiring knowledge is the scientific way, but this does not mean that science has discovered all truths. There might be many truths which have not yet been discovered. Curriculum should be mainly aided, and it should present to the present to the children a rounded view of the universe. Like naturalism, realism also lays emphasis on sense training, study of science, diversified curricula, catering education to varied interests, making methods of teaching interesting and basic theme of psychological principles. Is more emphasis on a curriculum and contents of studies than on behavior training like pragmatism. Education may be defined as behavior training, but according to realism, there are no possibilities of training without regard to the content of experience. By emphasizing the independence of objects, realists' lookout is more balanced than the pragmatic view, which overestimates the worth of human experiences. In conclusion, realism has exercised a very potent influence on modern education. The movement was not popular in the beginning. I remind of me that was about beginning bege bege nige nige bege nige nige bege nige bo bege nige khair, you know, it's beginning, okay, but gradually it gained movement and spread to different parts of the world. The increased interest in scientific studies, preference to the study of things before words, faith in the truths of science, enthusiasm for making broad based, making methods of teaching interesting, sense training, direct experience, all these bear out influence and contribution of realist trends of education. Realism places a great emphasis on curriculum or and content of studies. As a philosophy, it holds our attention while determining the content of studies, and as an educational trend and attitude, it influences our thinking with regard to methods of instructions. Now, naturalism is a type of philosophy which takes nature as a whole of reality. According to naturalism, the material and physical world is the only real world. It denies the existence of spiritual universe, the universe of ideas and values. The material world, which is the only reality, is being governed by a system of natural laws, and man, who is the creation of the material world, must submit to it. Naturalism has regard for the observable facts, for the realities, and for the actual situations of life. It does not believe in spiritualism and supernaturalism. Therefore, it does not believe in any spiritual values or absolute truths. For it, nature is everything. It is the whole of reality. It denies the existence of anything beyond nature, behind nature, or other than nature. It believes that everything comes from nature and returns to nature. Just like we come from the nature and we die in the nature. Nature, according to this philosophy, is a self sufficient entity. It cause within itself, it is self determined. It has been created and is moved by natural forces. Only nature is governed by its own laws. Naturalism does not believe in the spiritual nature of men. It makes a recourse to such concepts as appetites and emotions, which are regarded as the only motive of all our activities, biological, psychological, and social. According to it, moral instinct, innate conscience, other world miracles, providence, power of prayer, and freedom of will are illusions. And there is no absolute good or evil in the world, and there is no absolute evil in the world. Values of life, according to it, by the human needs, man creates them. When he reacts or interacts with his environment, he must adapt himself to environment. Naturalism believes that mind is an accident in the process of evolution, and it can be explained in terms of matter. Mind is the function of brain, which is material in nature. Mind is not the source of knowledge. All knowledge is acquired from without any sense organs that are the gateways of all knowledge. Basic principle of naturalism. Below given are some of the basic principles of naturalism. Naturally, nature is the final reality. All things have originated from matter, and all are ultimately to be reduced to that. Matter combined in different portions takes different forms. Mind in the brain functioning, and brain is the matter. Experience, imagination, thinking, and reasoning, etc. etc. All uh, processes of mental activity, which is the function of the brain. Laws of nature are unchangeable, and the entire universe is governed by them. Science reveals the mysteries of nature, hence, only that knowledge is true that is derived from science. Real knowledge comes through our senses. All matter is within the ken of human senses. Therefore, the final truth can be known through senses. There is no God or spirit, therefore, there is no religion. There are no higher or eternal values. There is spiritual ideal or aim or goal of human life. Man himself creates values in interaction with the environment in which he is placed. Divine inspiration, revelation, strength of prayer, power of soul, and other word. These are illusory conceptions and mislead human mind. Okay. Naturalism and education. Naturalism as philosophy of education was developed in 18th century. It exercised a great influence on the theory and practice of education. It decrees all external checks in the education, and it condemns all unnecessary formalities in education. In the naturalistic system of education, there is no place for classrooms, textbooks, timetable, curricula, formal formal lessons and or examination. The chalk and talk method has Spencer, an extreme naturalist, thought that human nature is strictly individualistic and that self preservation is the first law of life. Accordingly, he advocated the inclusion of those subjects which would subserve self preservation. He attaches no importance to cultural subject or those which enhance the value of man's social and cultural inheritance. Russia's curriculum for MLA in the first two stages, especially, and in the following stages, generally, was illustrative of the principle of negative education, which is the typical of the naturalistic philosophy, the subordinate of the child to the natural order and his freedom from the social order. The doctrine of negative education has applied to physical education, demanding the greatest possible freedom for the child in his movement and exercises. A simple diet, loose, scanty, and light clothing. etc. Intellectual education would amount to absence of verbal lessons, books, and any positive studies. The naturalists in general contends that the child's present experience, interests, and activities should determine the choice of studies. Child should be allowed to grow up in a free atmosphere. His natural inclinations, finding a suitable outlet, knowledge for his own sake is not an aim worthy of emulation or worth striving after. Naturalism and methods of teaching. In methods of teaching, naturalism is a revolt against the old, traditional, and stereotyped methods. It condemns learning by rote and passive drill work and emphasizes activity and learning by doing. It advocates the education should provide real experience to the child and help him to learn with his own personal experience. He should take his lesson from nature, not from men. Hence, there should be no formal school and textbooks. The best thing is to let him follow nature because it supplies all the laws of learning. Direct experiences from nature, men, and things from the basic of instruction according to naturalism. Rosier's advice was give your scholar no verbal lessons. Give your scholar no verbal lessons. He should be taught by experience alone. Teach by doing whenever you can and only fall back on words when doing it out of question. Best knowledge, book knowledge should be as little as possible. Emile, for example, was to discover things for himself in learning science. He would make use of rough experiments performed by the help with the help of apparatus self-made and self-invented. He was to adopt the heuristic attitude and to apply it in the first hand study of natural phenomena. The same principle is to work in learning mathematics, geography, and history. Thus, the direct principle is to work in learning mathematics, laboratory methods of teaching, of learning sciences and mathematics, the observational method in geography, all etc. illustrate the naturalistic attitude. The naturalists believe that every child's ability of acquire knowledge and to benefit thereby is individual. Hence, those class methods which assume a uniform speed of learning for every child are discredited by them. The naturalistic methodology has been aptly described by Rose when he says the naturalist educator rightly thinks less of his own exposition, much more of the learning experience of the pupil. In other words, they advocate the use of pedocentric methods, which stress the importance of the educand in the process of education more than the subject matter of the educator himself. In short, the naturalists advocate such methods of teaching which offer the growth in the atmosphere which offer the child an opportunity for self-education, self-expression, creative activity, and integrated growth in an atmosphere of unrestrained freedom. In the words of Rose, the naturalist educator allows the child to follow the lines of his natural interest and to have free choice of activities with no interference or thwarting naturalism and the teacher. In an educational system based on the naturalistic philosophy, the teacher has a peculiar, peculiar place and a duty to perform. Neither is he to interfere with the activities of children, nor is he to provide any ideals or ideas in order to form from their character. He must not impose himself on them and must see that their education is the free development of their interests and motives rather than an artificial effort made by him. He has to provide them with suitable opportunities for and create conditions which are conducive to natural development. He is not an expert to expect any undue difference from the pupils he teaches, nor does he try to look superior. He tries to understand them, loves them, and approves of their behavior. He is on the side of the child. Roizio and Fichte are in favor of such intervention of of the teacher on account of the child's nature. It is contended by them that the child's nature is essentially good and intervention is therefore harmful. Montessori deems the teachers of the didactic apparatus can evoke the right type of response from the child and thereby perform the function of a teacher. Oh, it's so. Okay, okay, guys, I can't complete this. I'm so tired. Goodbye. Take care. Allah Hafiz.